name is Peter, and on behalf of Mercantech in Denmark, I'm here to talk a little about the use case presentation for our course 4.6 on analytical tools, which dived into the realm of cybersecurity, and more specifically, we focused on making what we call a risk assessment. So first of all, the targets for this course were initially the technical professionals working in defense and aerospace industry, and later on the audience was broadened a bit to include university licensed students. Some of the domains we addressed during the course were information security, cybersecurity, and infrastructure. The topics within these domains were assets, threats, and vectors, publicized compromises, common vulnerability exploits, mitigation techniques, threat or risk assessments, and what we call a cybersecurity framework. I have made a small teaser on why this topic is relevant for today, and afterwards, I described the course as a course which purpose is to provide participants with an introduction to key cybersecurity concepts, use this new knowledge in analyzing and discussing publicized compromises, and lastly, in order to learn how to perform a basic threat or risk assessment of valuable company personal assets in order to mitigate the likelihood and/or consequences of potential compromises. So that's a very long sentence, but that's the bottom line of this course. My approach to the course, first of all, it was over the duration of 3 days, and each day started with the introductory lectures. I always start by introducing participants to the concepts of within the domain, and then I'm a very firm believer of learn by doing. So I asked the participants to either discuss, reflect, or practice using these new concepts in some way, and typically I would combine these in the practical exercises. And later on, I would give them some advice for some further studying after the course was over, because it's a very big topic. So it was important for me to give the participants something to continue with on their own. And of course, we had a final exam and course evaluation. And I've divided these into all 3 days here, so you can see that we started by presenting the concepts, practicing and reflecting on these concepts, and lastly we met with the whole class in order to discuss how we practiced and how these concepts fit into their respective work areas. And of course I gave all of the participants a full schedule so that they would know each day at what time were they required to attend our presentations, at what time would they be required to study on their own. So the material instruments we used for this course were, among others, Microsoft Teams. We used some sort of word processing tool, which were Microsoft Word in most cases. And of course, we had some spreadsheets for the risk assessment specifically. And we used teaching materials, of course, where I use PowerPoint to teach from. And there were some practical demonstrations, because each time that the participants had been taught a new concept, I would show them how I could use that concept in some practical way before they had to do it on their own. And of course, they used their own PCs to meet up with the rest of the students and me on Microsoft Teams. And I also provided a contemporary cybersecurity framework. There are a lot of good open source cybersecurity frameworks out there, and that would be the end goal of the entire course, were for them to be able to start using such a framework on their own workplace. So some of the differences between the design and the execution of the course were that I had to adjust the schedule and materials for the course during the course, which was fine and went fine. I also had to change my platform because initially I had planned on using what we call Big Blue Button, which is a more interactive platform. But for some reason, the participants couldn't connect to Big Blue Button, probably due to firewall limitations. So I had to change to Microsoft Teams instead, which was also fine. The course was opened to licensed students, and there was a lack of registration from workers. I had expected more participants on this course, and I had expected that the target audience would not be changed during the when I made the course itself, the materials. So due to this change, I had to, of course, differentiate more between the students than I had initially planned. Some of the drivers which made the course easier were that I already had some materials of my own, so I had to finish them, of course, and adjust it for an international audience. And of course, it made it easier to perform this because it was online through Microsoft Teams. Some of the barriers were that some of the students did not have the prerequisite skill sets in order to understand some of the materials I provided them. And like I said just before, changing the targeted groups made it a bit more difficult. Also, there were limited registration. There were some noise from unmuted microphones in the beginning, pretty standard for new participants. And also, there were quickly a low attendance from the registered students during the course. There was not a lot of activity and sparring between me and them. So when I asked a question, there would just be silence, unfortunately. And another barrier were the initial communication from the asset partner to my own division leader, who had to then forward that communication to our team leader before the information arrived at me as the trainer. So there were a lot of intermediate steps which made communication a bit harder than I think it had to be. So concerning the industry participation during the design phase, I had none. But during the execution phase, like I said before, there was a lack of participation. My recommendations for the next time for the replication of this course would be to ensure that the participants have the prerequisite skill sets and are able to communicate these through an online platform, and also that they come from an industry that is relevant to the topic of cybersecurity, and more specifically the risk assessments. Maybe perhaps give the participants or registrants an incentive to pass the course and not just register and participate. In order to make sure that they follow through and are there for the last day as well as the first. And also I would like to lengthen this course by 2 days. The topics were a bit too compromised. So 2 days more, I think, would be perfect for this. So that's it for me. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in France. Bye-bye.